Abra sua mente.
And I have to remind you that I'm not here as a journalist, as a doctor, as a scientist. I am just curious, trying to open my mind and my heart and to listen about many matters I brought. I was wondering what I was going to ask you on, and here I received lots of questions that some people gave me here, and then I wrote by my own some of them. So I'm going to mix them. Please take.
Sure.
I am not sure. And maybe the first thing for me was, I feel like when you are in front of the I Ching, having the possibility of asking something. So maybe the first question I can do for you is, which is the correct question for you?
I think the two most important questions that human beings have is, who am I? And what is the purpose of my existence?
Okay. So, who am I, and who are you, and why are we here now? Do you think you have a role in our society? Do you have a mission in these days in our land?
I think, at the deepest level, you and I are both patterns of behavior of the universe. So, you're a transient pattern of behavior of the total universe, and so am I. And this conversation is a conversation of the universe with itself, using you and me as the instruments for that conversation. So, in the deeper reality, this conversation is part of the total pattern of events in evolution.
Well then, when I started thinking these questions, I thought about peace and love. And I thought these old ancient terms, as John Lennon said, maybe are all we need. Do you agree with that? Is it real that all we need is love and peace?
As long as we understand what those terms mean, love is not a sentiment, and love is not an emotion. Love is the ultimate truth at the heart of creation, which is that a single reality differentiates into the diversity of the universe. And when you experience that, then it becomes impossible to hurt or be hurt. And it is an expression of profound peace as well. Peace is, and love and truth and creativity and harmony are evolutionary impulses in the universe. Of course, the universe also has the other impulses of destruction and chaos and violence. They're part of existence. It just so happens that the evolutionary impulses usually are a little ahead of the non-evolutionary or inertial forces of the universe. And that's how the universe creates itself and then recreates itself. If you had only the peace and love, only peace and love and creativity, there would be nothing to do. You're an actor, so you know you need good guys and bad guys in a good movie.
Yes, of course. All of yes. Yeah. The main characters and the we have to create opposites in that.
You have to. The whole of creation is through contrast. Otherwise, there's no experience.
But, for example, I was wondering if violence creates more violence. For example, in fiction, in cinema, or in literature, is there the thought that violence creates more violence? And sometimes I'm worried about that in creating fiction.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that as human beings, the human species is only 200,000 years in its evolution. There were no human beings more than 200,000 years ago. the universe is 14 billion years old, and our planet is about 5 billion years old. So we are not even in our infancy as far as evolution is concerned. And during this period of evolution, the most important instinct that we've had for survival is what is called the fight or flight response, which means in a threatening situation, we either fight or we run away. And because of that, we have survived. But what has happened is that we have become so good at it now that we have become the predator on the planet. And there's a saying in evolution, a permanently victorious species risks its own extinction. So many evolutionary biologists are saying that we have to now move to the next stage. Survival of the fittest has to be replaced by survival of the wisest. That wisdom becomes the new criterion for evolution. That predatory relationships have to be overwhelmed by symbiotic relationships. That it's now our responsibility to nurture the web of existence, the ecosystem. And that as we move into the next phase of our evolution, if we move in that direction, then that will become what creates a new civilization.
And do you think that it's going to change visibly? Civilization is going to change in a term of time, in a near terms of time?
It needs to change because we are coming to a stage where the playing field for violence is going to be even. You know, in the next decade or so, what we call superpowers will become irrelevant because conventional weaponry and warfare will not be the way to supremacy. I have a cell phone in my pocket which acts like a computer. You can move electrons and cut off electricity, move electrons and hijack all the planes, or interfere with air traffic signals, move electrons and suffocate all the pacemakers and respirators, poison the food chain, cause the nuclear plant to leak. When that happens, you don't need superpowers. You could be an 18-year-old boy in a cave in Afghanistan. You don't even have to move. You use your cell phone to do all these things. So as the technologies get more sophisticated in their diabolical creativity, then it automatically makes the superpowers. Right now, you know, there are 5 countries which are supposedly the 5 permanent members of the Security Council who are responsible for 95% of the weapons trading, manufacture. It's good business. That's all going to become irrelevant. So either when you have modern technologies, modern capacities, and ancient habits, it's a devastating combination. And this is now the moment of crisis. Either we risk our extinction or we completely transform our consciousness. It's an interesting time. We could go either way. They say if insects disappeared from our planet, then in 5 years all life on this planet would stop because insects are part of the ecosystem. They also say that if human beings disappeared from the planet, then in 5 years life would flourish on our planet because we are the predator, we are the cancer, we are the danger at this moment. So from nature's point, think of it from nature's point of view. You know, human species...
We are the danger.
Yeah, it was a good experiment that didn't work.
Yeah, sometimes I think, I was going to ask you if, are we going too fast sometimes in terms of technology? I feel that human beings are creating such things that we cannot imagine the consequences of them. I mean, in terms of ecological disaster, or in a small way, all kind of waves and things through antennas and you mean cellular phones, all kind of things that we cannot measure its consequence.
Well, the fact is, though, that human creativity is unstoppable, and therefore technology is unstoppable. And yes, we do not know the consequences of what we create, but then nature has self-correcting mechanisms, you know. When we create technologies that get to a certain stage and you start to see cancer and illnesses, that's nature also correcting herself, you know. It's all a self-correcting process, so I wouldn't worry about that. The thing about technology is that technology by itself is neutral. What we do with technology is dependent on our state of consciousness. We can use the same technology to restore the ecosystem, the same technology to bring economic empowerment to the poor, the same technology to solve conflicts in the world through creativity and economic and other incentives, the same technology to create cross-cultural understanding through cross-cultural music and entertainment and cross-cultural stories, the same technology to create new mythology which will give new raw materials for our collective imagination, the same technology to harness the power of collective intelligence. So technology can be wonderful if we put our consciousness into what we want from it.
Okay. Let's stop for a minute, think of it, and we go on in a minute. Vamos a una pausa y seguimos con Deepak Chopra. That 3 days ago, when I heard that you were coming to Argentina, I was wondering if we were going to meet again. And I was thinking of, to write you an email to tell you if we can meet for other things, and I have some personal questions, not for here, but for me. And when that happened, when I was wondering if I was going to meet you, my phone rang, and the TV producer called me to ask me if I was able and prepared to make you an interview. And I get so shocked. And I said, well, that's destiny. And I think you call that synchro destiny. No? What you can tell me about that?
Well, at the most fundamental levels of the universe, everything is correlated with everything else. So it's called non-local correlation. There's physics to it that at the deepest levels of nature, there's infinite correlation. And in fact, that's the only way to explain nature or simultaneity. How does a human body, you have 100 trillion cells in the body, each cell does 6 trillion things per second, and every cell instantly correlates its activity with all the other cells. So a human body can think thoughts and play a piano and kill germs and remove toxins and make a baby all at the same time. That is because at that level, there is correlation even without the exchange of energy or information signals. It's a very fundamental concept now, this non-local correlation in physics, in particle physics. What this means is that what we call accident or randomness in the nature or chance or coincidence is actually the very mechanics of creation. In fact, everything that happens in the universe happens because of this synchronicity. Now, because we cannot see the full picture, and with our senses, you know, we only see 1/1000th of what's happening around us, and everything else gets edited out. In the inability to see the big correlations, when we cannot see the correlations, we say, oh, you know, it's a chance, it's an accident, it's a coincidence. But actually, even the word coincidence is a good word because it says co-incidence, many incidents happening simultaneously. So synchronicity is a phenomenon that seems to be improbable, but in the deeper reality, it's not. It's a phenomenon that's orchestrated outside the laws of space-time and causality. It's a phenomenon where everything is instantly correlated with everything else. But it's a phenomenon that occurs when you're in a more expanded state of consciousness, when you're not constricted or fearful or attached or worried or full of anxiety. It's more likely to happen. It's like you have an intention and you leave it, and there's no anxiety about it, and you're more in a state of interconnectedness, let's say. And you also then recognize that your very intention, you had the thought, well, that thought is also a pattern of behavior of the total universe. It's correlated with everything else. So it's not that your thought actually caused the event. Your thought was the simultaneous actualization of information in a larger bed of information. It was correlated with everything else. These are very important things to pay attention to, because it shows you actually that there's transformation happening through quantum leaps of creativity that are orchestrated through intention. Synchronicity is an expression of the creativity of the universe. You had the thought, but the universe then somehow creatively responded, it seems, to that thought. And it also shows you the connection between your inner world of thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires, and your outer world of space-time events, of relationships, of situations and circumstances. Normally we separate this. I have a private world, and there is a world out there, which is everyone to see. But as far as the universe is concerned, this world here and that world out there are both its own patterns of behavior, and they're correlated.
Yes. Well, it happens with health. I mean, health, it's the normal way of,
Right.
of being. Health, it is a sort of holy order that exists in nature. But I've heard about you that we can help to co-create that health. Is it, no? Do you think that it's that possible? How can we help to do that?
By not interfering. Everything that's happening in nature is through effortless spontaneity. You're not making your heart beat right now, it's doing it. You're not regulating your blood pressure, it's doing it. You're not regulating your body temperature, it's happening. You're not regulating your blood sugar or the secretion of hormones. All this activity is happening simultaneously and effortlessly. The same thing is true in nature. A bird is flying effortlessly, fish are swimming effortlessly, flowers bloom effortlessly. So you see in nature there's a principle called do less, accomplish more, and ultimately do nothing and accomplish everything. It's the spontaneity which with something comes out of nothing. The whole universe comes out of nothing. Nothing becomes everything. Now, whenever we interfere with that process through stress, which is the perception of threat by either feeling physically threatened or emotionally threatened or psychologically threatened, or getting too attached to me and mine, I am separate from everything else, or having attachment to the outcome, or using too much effort, or resisting the present moment, because the present moment is also a conspiracy of the total universe. You fight the present moment, you're fighting the whole universe. So anytime you put up resistance or fight or fear or separation, or everything is exclusively me or mine, or you get attached, then you start to interfere with that process. Health is wholeness, health is holy, health is healing. It's the spontaneous experience of I am connected with all that exists.
I feel the worst enemy I have, and I think the worst enemy we have, is fear. Why is this enemy so powerful against us?
Fear comes from feeling separate. Fear comes from I'm alone, that it's me and the world. But actually there's no such thing. You are the world is in you, and you are in the world. You co-create each other. They are different expressions of, differentiated expressions of a deeper intelligence. When you know that, then there's peace, there's total peace, and there's comfort, and there is no anxiety, because anxiety comes from separation. You say, why is it so dominant in our world? It's part of the hypnosis of social conditioning. That's how our media, that's how our advertising, that's how our products and our services, they're all about instant gratification for the skin-encapsulated ego.
In the Western world we live, it's little, sometimes I feel it's difficult to deal with that because we are constantly receiving the influence of excess of stimulation, the most of the times in the wrong way.
Yeah, and especially if you receive it through childhood, then your little brain and the child thinks that's reality, unfortunately. So it's a deep hypnosis, and one has to be conscious of it. One has to take time to say, you know, just because it's all prevalent around me, and just because everybody's behaving like this, it doesn't mean it's normal. What we call normal is the psychopathology of the average.
And how can we protect our childhood, our children against
By
that?
being good examples. You know, children don't listen to lectures, they'll follow your lead.
Yeah, as a father, do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 grandchildren now.
2 grandchildren. So, well, as a father, I have a young kid. I always think that it's impossible to avoid making mistakes.
But that's fine. Mistakes. You learn from mistakes. You just don't have to repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, I think that younger countries are like kids, like younger people. You know? Big opportunities and also big mistakes. And that happens a lot here. What's your vision of our country, of Argentina, or Latin America in general, in nowadays? What is?
Well, you see, the old countries also have a burden. Culture is a big burden because when you have too much history, too much culture, then it overwhelms your creativity. And so, you know, just like you said, that young countries have so much creativity sometimes that it leads to anarchy and confusion. And old cultures have so much the burden of the past that they don't really embark on any creativity at all. I think we're moving in a new era now where there will be the hybridization of a global collective intelligence. That's the only way to move forward, is to have cross-cultural understanding, to understand how the minds of different people work and think, to put everything in a context. There's cultural context, there's economic context, there's historical context, there's mythical context, there's religious context. We don't know this. You know, I just participated in a recent poll where we have for the first time surveyed more than 200 million Islamic people about everything, about values, about habits, about relationships, about sex, about spirituality, about war, about terrorism, about ecology. And that information is so important because how do you negotiate with people or talk to people or have a dialogue with people if you don't even know what they're thinking and feeling? You know, if I, on the other hand, know how do you feel, what your observations are, how do you interpret your reality, what are your values, then I have a chance of connecting with your heart and your mind. But we now live in a society where that should be possible. You know, instead of trying to solve all our conflicts through violence, you know, and belligerence and arrogance and militarism, which is very primitive and is no basis, you know, today with the intelligence that we have in the world to have to do that. It's like medieval, you know, and yet that's the only way we behave. And if we are going to move to the next stage of our evolution, we have to use our collective intelligence. There's a lot of intelligence in the world. It needs to be harnessed and connected.
Okay, let's take a break and we go on in a minute. En un minuto seguimos con Deepak Chopra. Gracias.
Abra sua mente.
Well, I was thinking, how can we learn about this? Where can we go? Where can we help? Where can we join? And I heard you speaking about the GSA, so you can explain us how's the work there and which are the goals in GSA?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we have a new foundation called Alliance for the New Humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a website in Spanish also and in English. The website is www.anhglobal.org. www.anhglobal.org.
It will be on the screen now.
Yeah, okay. Now, what this is it's an effort to create a global community, both online, but also virtually and actually geographically, of what we call the new planetary mind. There are a lot of people in the world who are doing amazing things for ecology, for conflict resolution, for women, for children, for human rights, for social justice, for helping the poor become economically free. So they're already doing it. You know, these are like neurons that are all over the planet. The goal is now to connect them. And once you connect them, what you see is, oh, so-and-so is doing this, so-and-so is doing this, so-and-so is doing this. First of all, you get inspired. The second thing is you say that, you know, maybe I can help this person, or maybe this person can help me. So first they come together, then they connect with each other. And once they connect with each other, they exchange information, they exchange inspiration, they morally support each other, and sometimes they come up with creative ideas for even helping each other financially. I think we think of our foundation as a dating service. You know, when you connect two people, you don't know what's going to happen. Okay, they may fall in love.
But they should meet.
Okay, but they should meet. Yeah. And so now we're saying is there's so many conscious people, so many conscious communities, so many conscious organizations that are doing so many things. They should meet. And once they meet, we don't know what can happen. Once you reach a critical mass of consciousness with people like this, the world could transform. You know, it took a few mothers to get together in America and say, you know, if somebody drives and they're drunk, that's against the law. Okay, it took a few people to say, you know, you cannot smoke in public places. And now, you know, many restaurants you can't smoke, at least in North America. It takes a few people to change the world, always. It's always been done by a few people. And what we feel is if we start to connect these people and create this critical mass of consciousness, a day may come when they say, you know, if this country goes to war, it's not part of the family of nations. We don't want to have anything to do with them. If they make weapons, if they trade in guns, if they are the biggest dealers and agents of destruction on this planet, we don't want to have anything to do with them. That will happen. It'll become international law one day.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke about creativity, and I was thinking, which is the precise mission of art in our lives, because art has been with us since the old times. So which is the mission of art, and why is art so near us?
Yes, you know, one of the things the United Nations is doing right now is they have a plan for what they call global Millennium Development Goals. You know, so many mosquito nets in Africa, curing of AIDS by such and such year, removing poverty, etc., etc. And what people are discovering is that you can have these goals, but they do not work till you have a convincing story, okay, that human beings are storytellers, and what we call reality out there is the story that we have told ourselves. Therefore, art, theater, music, these are the ways we tell our story. And you know, that's why people watch soap operas, that's why we watch television, because they want to see the story, they're fascinated by stories. We've told ourselves a story that is now the projected reality. And it's time to change the story. It's time to change the narrative. And there's no more powerful way to do that than through the medium of art. And even in these places, you see where the United Nations is working on AIDS, for example, you have to start, first of all, what's the story? Okay. It's not enough to give them drugs. You know, it costs, by the way, it costs $10,000 US dollars to treat one patient in Africa with AIDS per year. 10,000 US dollars. Why? Because the drugs are sold at market prices by multinational companies, and that's how they make money. But the same drugs can be bought in Asia for $400. But that's, you see, that's part of the story. Those drugs are not good. You have to change the story. But it's not the drugs. It's also the behaviors, the facts, the exploitation of women, the trafficking of children, the violation of human rights. Once you start to tell the stories compellingly, and you say, this is what is happening in our society, then we are, you know, human beings are compassionate, loving, understanding people. That's the real function of art. And art is here to create the new mythology, the new story that we want to spark our collective imagination with. Because it is in our collective imagination that the solution to whether it's AIDS, whether it's poverty, whether it's ecological disasters, or whether it's war.
It's healing in a previous level, or not?
Yes, it's healing at a much deeper level, yes. See, America's fascination with war. You have movies on First World War, on Vietnam, on Second World War, on Korea. It's crazy. It's totally the story.
Even in the future, and the Star Wars.
Star Wars, it's all about, the stories are all about violence. So that creates the collective, sparks the collective imagination. You have to change the narrative.
I always thought that humor is a high level of intelligence.
Humor is the highest level of spirituality, yes.
Oh, thank you to confirm that to me.
Highest level of spirituality.
I'm glad to hear that. And why? And why?
Synchronicity is an expression of God's humor, isn't it? You know, synchronicity is the paradox of existence. If I have to explain a joke to you, then it's not a joke. But when your soul recognizes the paradox, it laughs.
Qué divertido. I'm using a lot. I'm enjoying a lot. Well, tell us something about quantum healing. That is one of your main, I think.
Yeah, a quantum in physics is the smallest indivisible unit in which waves of information and energy are either emitted or absorbed. So a quantum of light is a photon. A quantum of electricity is an electron. A quantum in consciousness is an idea, a thought. And medicine has for long recognized a phenomenon that it never understood. It's called spontaneous remission. So a person has a disease and then the disease goes away. And more we recognize what is happening. It's an example of biological creativity. So quantum healing is biological creativity, a shift in consciousness and a shift in biology. Because your consciousness, which is the same thing as your soul, your spirit, it simultaneously differentiates into what we call perception, what we see out there, whether we see is threatening or nurturing, cognition, how we think, moods and emotions and feelings, biology, behavior, social interactions, personal relationships, and environment all create our everyday reality. But this everyday reality is a function of our state of consciousness. When there's a shift in consciousness, then everything changes. The environment changes, relationships change, social interaction changes, biology changes, behavior changes, perception changes, moods change, and thoughts change. It's a complex thing, but it is an example of biological creativity. So you have two people with cancer. One behaves totally predictably, dies in such and such time. The other person, for whatever reason, had a shift in their consciousness that allowed their biology to respond creatively. That's quantum healing.
And is it real that we can change our our DNA?
You don't change the DNA, you change the expression of the DNA.
The expression.
Yeah. So, your DNA responds to your internal dialogue. If I threaten you with something, your DNA will stop making messenger RNA for immunomodulators. It's been done. Many experiments have been done. The DNA has almost an infinite amount of information. Most of it is unexpressed, okay? Most of it is unexpressed. And your state of consciousness, whether you're feeling threatened or fear or love or compassion, will actually influence the behavior of the DNA. So you don't change the DNA, you change the behavior of the DNA, what it expresses.
I heard something about activating the 13 helicoids or spirals in that. I am wrong? Or is it?
You may be right. I don't know the technical
I don't know.
aspects of this. But certainly, the DNA is very flexible in its response to what's happening in consciousness and what's happening in your inner world. And even your thoughts influence the behavior of your DNA, your moods, your emotions.
Thank you very much. We'll wait a minute. Ya volvemos. Hay más.
Está a ver Canal Infinito. Abra sua mente.
There's also sunshine and rain and rainbows and earth and water and wind and the infinite void and the whole history of the universe right here. It's also spirit in manifestation. So you feel the truth when you experience beauty. There's a flower and there's the whole universe right here.
You talk something about water. Water is, life starts in the water. And nowadays in the planet, water is getting more and more, apparently, not more important, but there is something about that. Do you think it will be a problem?
Not if we use our creativity, because there's ways to harvest rainwater. You can harvest rainwater. There are ways to use the sea and desalinate the water. There's a lot of creative ways to harness it's ultimately, nothing is destroyed. It's all recycled. Your body is being recycled since the beginning of creation. You have at least 1 million atoms in your body that were once in the body of Christ, or Buddha, or Michelangelo. So if we understand that nature recreates herself constantly, and we just facilitate that intelligence in nature, then there's no lack of resources at all. But we have to see that it is done from a selfless point of view. Right now we have a situation where 5% of the world consumes 50% of the world's resources.
Is it true that water molecules have the a sort of memory?
Yes.
As Emoto said, there is a sort of...
He's right, absolutely right. Water responds to intention, water responds to thoughts, water responds to love and compassion. And that's why when the ancient wisdom traditions, they used to bless the water, the holy water, Sacrament. When you go to the church, you have holy water, sacrament. It has healing properties. Or you go to Lourdes, or you go to, some of these places where there is, the water has the collective intent of sacred sacrament. And the water actually does have healing properties, because it's imbued with consciousness.
Why are we so scared about death?
Well, because we are not aware that death is the ticket to life. because, you know, your skin cells die once a month. They didn't, your skin would be like leather. Your stomach cells die every 5 days, so they recreate themselves. In medicine, biology, we use a term called apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cellular death. And when cells forget to die, they become cancer. Cancer is a vacation from death. So at every level, at the atomic level, at the subatomic level, at the molecular level, at the level of your organs, the universe is dying so it can recreate itself. Where's the 2-year-old that you once were? It's dead. Okay? The 2-year-old had to die so the teenager could emerge. The teenager had to die so this mature person could emerge. And one day this person must die so the universe can recreate itself in a fresh way. Every child that is born is the universe looking at itself with fresh eyes and more creativity. If we didn't have death, the universe would be mummified. And there would be no music, there would be no art, there would be no humor, there would be no dance, there would be no rhythm, there would be nothing. It would be a static, living mummy.
There is a question that many years ago I couldn't answer to my son. But I said to him, go on asking about that because that will lead you somewhere. I think that question is the beginning of something. So I cannot answer you, but you go on asking about that. And he was 2 or 3 years old, and he asked me, if God made everything, who made God? Can't you answer me?
First of all, you know, who is God? God is being that becomes. So God didn't make anything. God became everything. Okay. The universe is the physical body of God. And there is a level of reality that's transcendent, which means it is acausal, which means it operates outside the laws of space-time and causality. So that level has no beginning and it has no ending. It's infinite. Now we cannot imagine infinity, but we put a symbol, you know, mathematics symbol, so that's infinity, but that doesn't mean you know what infinity is. As soon as you say there was a beginning, then you're immediately left with the dilemma. If there is a beginning, what's there before the beginning? If you say there's an ending, then you're immediately left with the dilemma, what's there after the ending? If you say there are edges in space, then the immediate question is what's there after the outermost edge? So our new physics is not only more confusing than we think it is, it's more confusing than we can even conceptualize. And yet the fact is that infinity is the reality, okay? That the real has no beginning and has no ending. It is acausal. Nobody made it. It is its own self. And it furthermore does not exist in space-time. It's transcendent. You can't conceptualize it, but you can experience it.